Everybody, and welcome to my channel. Have you seen these star quilt blocks and they kind of look intimidating? Well, I'm going to show you how it's done so easily with half square triangles and quilt squares. Well, let's get started and I'll show you how it's done. In this block, we'll be measuring 12.5 inches unfinished, and also we're going to be needing for the supplies 3.5 and 4-inch squares. And also the quantities are left in the description box below. And now we're going to prepare the fabric for the half square triangles. And as you can see, I'm going to be marking a line diagonally. And when I start marking the fabric, what I like to do is start from the center and go out, because sometimes your fabric when it's cut can be a little bit stretchy if it's on the bias. And this way it helps prevent that. Now we're going to begin by placing our drawn fabric onto the background squares right sides together. And now we're going to sew 1/4 inch on each side of the drawn line. And when I'm sewing, what I like to do is called chain piecing. That way it keeps all of my blocks together. And now it's time to cut our blocks apart, and then we're going to be cutting on the drawn line. And then once cut, it's going to have two pieces out of one block, making the half square triangles. And then once our blocks are cut in half, we're going to trim them down for the 3.5-inch block. What I like to use is called Clearly Perfect slotted trimmers, and if you notice that there's a little perforation or stitch line on that, you place that onto your triangle piece there on the stitch line of the size needed and trim, and then it's perfectly squared to the dimension. It's also very easy to square your blocks with a traditional ruler. And whenever I'm trimming down my fabric, I do like to use a smaller cutting mat. That way I can make it into a rotating cutting mat. And now it's time to iron our blocks open. Before I begin to iron my block open, I do like to press the iron down to relax the seams on the stitching, and then fold up and then press the iron. I don't really like to iron back and forth because some stretching of the fabric can occur. And now we're going to trim the dog ears. All of our pieces have been prepared and we're going to start building our block. What I'd like to begin with is the corners. I use my background fabric and place them all in the four corners. And then we're going to begin by our center block. We're going to be using four 3.5-inch squares and we're going to stagger the colors. And as you can see, I've separated the light and the dark half square triangles, and we're going to be using one set on each point. And as you can see, the background fabric is pointed toward the center of the block. And now we're going to begin sewing. We're going to be sewing column 2 onto column 1. We'll be chain piecing, so I'm going to be stacking the blocks in line. Now we're going to begin sewing with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to prepare column 4 onto column 3 and sew in the same technique. And now we're going to flip column 3 and 4 that's sewn together onto 1 and 2 and then sew. And now it's time to iron our blocks. We're going to iron row 1 and row 3 in one direction, that is the seams, and then rows 2 and 4 in the opposite. That way we're going to be able to nest the seams. I'm going to begin by the lower section and I'm going to be pinning them together. If I do have any of my chain piecing threads, I do like to snip those so I can prepare them for the nesting. As you can see here, I'm going to have to clip that thread. I line up my seam, and if you notice the seams that were sewn, one's facing one direction and one the other. That way it'll lock into the stitches. And when I'm pinning, I don't pin horizontally or vertically. I do it at a diagonal. For me, I don't know why, but it's always kept my stitches locked in place while I'm sewing. And now repeat on the opposite side. And sew with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to prepare and sew our center seam just like the ones we did prior. Now iron and trim if needed, and our block is complete. Is there a quilt block you'd like to make out of charm squares, but yet you don't have enough of the same colors that's needed in the 5-inch square size? Well, I'm going to link in the iCard above how to make your own charm squares out of fat quarters. Thanks for watching, everybody. Happy sewing, and see you next time.